Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to ancient China, somewhere between the smell of sandalwood and the slow clack of embroidered slippers across polished stone. You're in the imperial palace now. The air is thick with incense, the light filtered through silk screens, and behind all that formality, a girl named Wu Chao, just 14 years old, standing still but dreaming fast. You can practically hear the weight of her ambition, even if she doesn't quite know where it will lead her yet. You'll follow her across decades, through palaces and prayer halls, conspiracies and coronations. And yes, you probably won't survive this. Politically speaking. Almost no one around her did. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake enough, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the sandstone courtyard of the early Tang dynasty, past curved rooftops that seem to levitate over quiet gardens. It's 636 CE, and Emperor Taizong, the founder of the Tang, has just accepted a new group of concubines into his court. Among them, Wu Zhao, the teenage daughter of a well-off family from Shanxi. She's not the emperor's favorite, not yet. She's not even particularly noticed. Historians still argue whether she was chosen for her wit, her literary talent, or simply because of her family's connections. But here's what you do know. She didn't plan to fade quietly into a footnote. Instead, you find her in the back halls of the palace, listening more than speaking, watching how everything works. You know that look. It's the same one you had when you figured out how to mute yourself on Zoom and still get credit for attending class. The harem is a strange place. It's not just about beauty or charm. It's about positioning, etiquette, alliances. There are hundreds of women here, and the odds of getting the emperor's attention are about as high as someone noticing your new haircut on a windy day. But Wu starts to stand out. Not for her looks, though that certainly doesn't hurt, but because she asks sharp questions. She reads. She memorizes poetry. She learns the rules not to follow them, but to understand where they bend. Some fringe scholars claim she began secretly studying statecraft during this time, snooping on conversations between eunuchs, deciphering the logic of court rituals. Others say that's romanticizing. Still, there's a clear sense. This girl knows the palace isn't just a home. It's a game board. You stroll through corridors lit by flickering oil lamps, hearing gossip whispered behind fans. Empress Jiangsun, the emperor's wife, is still alive at this time. And though she's respected, her influence is waning. That leaves a delicate vacuum, a space where court women jostle for position and favor, offering advice, poetry, and more practical services. You pause near the Hall of Literary Brilliance because, yes, it's literally called that, and peek inside. Wu is there, reciting Confucian texts by candlelight. She's not expected to do this, but she does it anyway. Maybe it's ambition, maybe boredom, maybe the kind of curiosity that gets cats and concubines into trouble. Taizong, the emperor, is aging. His health falters, the court tightens, the factions sharpen. And yet, Wu remains, steady, composed, not flashy, but not invisible either. She's like the person in group projects who does just enough to seem unthreatening, but ends up knowing everyone's part by the end. Then in 649 CE, Emperor Taizong dies. Now here's where things get chilly, literally and figuratively. Custom dictates that childless concubines, like Wu, are to be sent to a Buddhist nunnery. Think of it as a retirement plan with prayer beads and cold porridge. You don't get to stay in the palace. You don't get to move on. You're tucked away, filed under former personnel. So off she goes. She shaves her head. She chants sutras. She does a lot of sitting. And not in the comfortable Netflix way. But something is brewing. Before Taizong died, his ninth son, Li Ji, had taken a liking to Wu. Nothing scandalous, yet just a few lingering glances, a few shared poems. Now Li Ji is Emperor Gaozong. And he remembers her. That alone is notable. Concubines weren't supposed to re-enter court life once retired. But Gaozong, now reigning emperor, brings Wu Zhao back from the nunnery. A fringe move, like texting your ex and inviting her to brunch with your mom. Bold. Questionable. Court officials are scandalized. So are other concubines, especially Empress Wang, who sees Wu as a threat. Because she is a threat. Wu re-enters the palace with a quiet, almost serene confidence. You feel it walking next to her. She no longer just wants attention. She wants access, authority. And she's willing to bide her time. She's no longer the naive teenager. She's the one who's watched a dynasty from the inside, who's observed the ceremonies, the betrayals, the balance of charm and cunning. And she's about to start making moves of her own. Also, as a minor sensory detail you didn't ask for but now can't unhear, court ladies at the time reportedly used crocodile dung as part of their makeup regimen. Yup, beauty is pain, and also weird. You're standing in the dim hallway of a Buddhist nunnery now, your feet cold against the polished stone floor, incense curling in lazy spirals toward a ceiling that leaks both light and hope. Wu Zhao is here too. She's been banished. Not in name exactly, but in every other way that matters. The former concubine of Emperor Taizong, now shaven-headed, cloaked in gray, chanting in rhythm with the other exiles. The silence is heavy, not peaceful, just thick. Like the kind of quiet that hums when no one's sure what will happen next. There's a flickering oil lamp beside Wu's straw sleeping mat. You see her eyes open before dawn. She doesn't belong here. She knows it. You know it. She doesn't pray like someone seeking salvation. She prays like someone planning an escape. Historians still debate whether Wu genuinely followed Buddhist teachings or merely used the nunnery as a holding pattern, a quiet cocoon before her next metamorphosis. Either way, she's waiting, biding, studying. This is not a woman who accepts the fate handed to her. And just outside the monastery walls, Emperor Gaozong, Li Ji, Taizong's son, remembers her. Their past glances, the poems they shared, the sharp intelligence that seemed too large for her concubine's quarters. He's now emperor, but he's not exactly in control. The palace is a tangle of tradition, whispers, and power plays, and he's not great at detangling things. So he does something bold, something eyebrow-raising. He invites Wu Zhao back. This isn't normal. You don't just unnun someone. The rules of the Tang court are clear. If your emperor husband dies and you didn't bear him children, your palace days are over. Full stop. Yet in one move, Gaozong reopens that door and walks right through it. People are scandalized. Court officials squint over scrolls, double-checking the protocols, buttering into their inkpots. Empress Wang, the current empress and a politically savvy woman herself, is less than thrilled. It doesn't take a political genius to know that Gaozong's old flame is now a roaring fire. Wu returns to court not as a girl this time, but as a woman with experience, scars, and ambition that smells sweeter than the palace peonies. She knows how the corridors bend, where the power pools, how the hierarchy isn't just about titles. It's about influence, and she's learned exactly where to plant hers. You walk beside her in soft silk shoes down the red lacquered hallways, past other concubines who glance sideways and whisper after she passes. Wu says nothing. She doesn't need to. Soon enough, she becomes one of Gaozong's concubines. Again. This time not as a minor note, but as his favorite. He listens to her, asks her advice. She's not just sharing pillows. She's sharing policy opinions. And this unnerves people, especially Empress Wang. She's been childless, which is bad for her status. Wu Zhao, however, bears the emperor a child, a daughter. And just like that, her rank climbs. Gaozong starts promoting her. The court begins to murmur in earnest. Some scholars believe this is when Wu truly began her campaign, not for love, but for the throne itself. Of course, not everyone agrees on how much was strategy and how much was survival. Historians still argue whether she was calculating from the start or simply seizing opportunities as they came. You can't help but think, maybe it was both. Maybe Wu was a woman smart enough to recognize the game and brave enough to play it better than anyone else. The rivalry between Wu and Empress Wang intensifies. Petty at first, then political, then dangerous. Imagine every passive-aggressive group chat you've ever seen. Now replace emojis with accusations of witchcraft. A quirky detail? Empress Wang once gifted Wu a beautiful dress made of deliberately coarse fabric, designed to look luxurious but feel like sandpaper. Royal trolling at its finest. Still, Wu doesn't retaliate immediately. She waits. Then she bears a second child. Then a third. Sons. Royal sons. Game-changing sons. Now, children in the imperial court are more than bundles of joy. They're political leverage. They're bargaining chips. They're living declarations of relevance. Wu uses them wisely. The emperor trusts her more with every heir she produces. Meanwhile, Empress Wang remains childless and increasingly isolated. And then it happens. A scandal so infamous it still echoes through the centuries. Wu Zhao gives birth to a daughter. Not long after, the child dies under suspicious circumstances. The official story? The baby was found strangled in her crib. The court erupts with rumor. Whispers blame Empress Wang, or her ally, Consort Xiao, or perhaps, depending on whom you ask, Wu Zhao herself. Yes, there's a theory, dark and unsettling, that Wu may have killed her own infant daughter to frame her rivals and trigger their downfall. Historians still argue whether this accusation holds truth or was pure propaganda. Some say it's absurd, misogynistic fear-mongering. Others believe Wu was capable of such a move, calculating enough to sacrifice one child for the future of her others. Whatever happened, the result is clear. Gao Zong is horrified. He demotes Empress Wang, strips her of titles. Eventually, both Wang and Consort Xiao are executed. Not gently either. One version claims Wu had them tortured and displayed in the palace courtyard. Another says she simply had them quietly dispatched. You wonder if she slept well that night. Now, with rivals gone and her children legitimized, Wu Zhao is elevated. Not just as a favored consort, she is made empress. From the nunnery to the throne, she's rewritten every rule, dodged every ceiling, outlasted every rival. You follow her into her new quarters, which are now the finest in the palace. The roof tiles are glazed imperial yellow. The air is filled with the scent of cassia and cherry wood. And yet, she doesn't relax. Not really. She's won a title. But power? Power is a slippery fish, and the pond is full of men with nets. You settle deeper into the cushions of time as Wu Zhao, now Empress Wu, glides across the marbled courtyard like someone who never really left the center stage. She's no longer a concubine, no longer just a whisper in the back halls. She's the emperor's wife, the official empress of China. But if you think that means she's going to relax, sip tea, and admire calligraphy all day, well, she didn't claw her way back from the nunnery just to be decorative. Still, this rise to power wasn't all robes and roses. Behind the silks and ceremonies is a story of meticulous control, slow revenge, and a deep understanding of palace dynamics. You walk with her through layers of bureaucracy and bamboo screens, each one revealing another step in her quiet takeover. Emperor Gaozong, her husband, is not the strongest ruler. He suffers from chronic illness, likely hypertension or possibly complications from a stroke, and over time, he leans more and more on Empress Wu. What starts as affection turns into reliance, then dependence, and then something that looks a lot like abdication, just with more paperwork. But first, Empress Wu must clean house. You see, the imperial court is still full of those loyal to the previous Empress Wang and Consort Xiao. These officials aren't fans of Wu's meteoric rise, and many are just waiting for her to slip. Instead, she slips them right out of power. You listen quietly as one minister is accused of corruption, gone. Another is discovered in a scandal involving falsified reports. Poof. A few are exiled, a few just disappear. Fringe records suggest some were poisoned at court banquets, always the fish, never the duck. Historians still argue whether these purges were preemptive paranoia or clever survival strategy. Either way, Wu removes opposition like you might peel off a stubborn price sticker, slowly, methodically, without leaving a trace. And then, as always, there's poetry, because nothing says high-stakes political warfare like passive-aggressive verse. Empress Wu encourages scholars and poets to praise her rule, subtly at first. She hosts literary salons, commissions elegant works that compare her to wise female rulers of old, even the mythological ones. Quirky fact: at one point a poet compares her to the Queen Mother of the West, a Taoist deity associated with immortality and feminine power. Wu reportedly liked the comparison enough to lean into it for future PR. Meanwhile, Gaozong is tired. He holds fewer meetings. He lets Wu sit behind the curtain during imperial audiences, offering her thoughts in a soft voice that somehow always becomes the final decision. You sit on the floor beside her, sipping chrysanthemum tea while ministers bow, not to the emperor anymore, but to the person behind him. Eventually, they stop pretending. Wu begins to issue edicts in Gaozong's name. She reads reports, directs projects, even oversees military appointments. The emperor is technically still ruling, but by now he's the human version of a ceremonial vase, handsome, historic, and largely ornamental. Then comes the scandal. Oh yes, another one. Wu's niece, the lovely and tragically doomed Lady Helan, becomes the center of gossip. She's young, beautiful, and increasingly popular at court. Gaozong seems fond of her. Too fond. Wu sees the writing on the wall and, in one of her colder moves, allegedly has Helen poisoned. A little tea, a little tincture, a quiet end. Historians still debate whether this was an act of jealousy, a calculated strike against potential rivals, or simply another page from her growing book of How to Keep Power 101. Either way, it works. And then, Wu does something bold. Again, you sense a pattern. She orders the rewriting of history, literally. She commissions revised biographies of women from the past, emphasizing their intelligence, leadership, and moral authority. The message is clear. Female rule isn't just possible. It's preferable, acceptable, divine even. You find yourself in the imperial library, shelves groaning with bamboo scrolls, as scribes dip their brushes and erase the old lines that once minimized women's influence. It's like watching a time traveler edit Wikipedia, except the stakes are life and death, and the keyboard is a block of jade. By now, Wu has multiple sons, each with their own advisors, their own loyalties, and, spoiler alert, their own knives. The eldest, Li Hong, is named Crown Prince. He's thoughtful, intelligent, popular with scholars, and possibly too independent. So of course he dies young, possibly of illness, possibly of poison, possibly of being inconvenient. Fringe theory alert. There's a dusty scroll that implies Empress Wu may have offed her own son to replace him with a more controllable one. Even her surviving children never quite trust her. Can't imagine why. Still, she presses on. More projects, more appointments, and, of course, more temples. Ah, yes, the Buddhist connection. You see, Wu's affinity with Buddhism becomes a major tool in her political arsenal. She patronizes monks, funds temple construction, and sponsors the production of sacred texts, many of which, conveniently, include prophecies about a great female ruler destined to lead China into a golden age. Wonder who that might be. Quirky tidbit. One monk claimed to have found a relic inscribed with the words, "The Maitreya Buddha will soon be reborn as a woman." Subtle, no? Wu encourages this narrative. She's not just empress now, she's chosen, divine, foretold. It's around this time she starts calling herself Zetian, model of heaven. Not exactly modest, but hey, if the sandal fits. And you? You're still here, padding softly through the layers of history, watching as Empress Wu consolidates power like a boss building the ultimate empire in a real-time strategy game. Every appointment is deliberate. Every smile has calculus behind it. Even the palace pets probably had an agenda. As Gaozong continues to fade, his health now so frail he can barely attend court, Wu's control tightens. Ministers go through the motions, but everyone knows who's really running the empire. And still she keeps the pretense. For now. Because she's not done rising yet. You follow the gentle echo of silk robes gliding through the palace corridors as Wu Zetian, Empress Wu, reaches a new pinnacle in her career. The year is around 660 CE now, and Gaozong's health is worse than ever. His eyes sometimes glaze over mid-meeting. His hands tremble like autumn leaves caught in a breeze. And you know what that means. Wu is no longer just the power behind the throne. She is beginning to wear the throne. It's a delicate dance, though. The Tang dynasty still operates on centuries-old traditions, and a woman ruling in her own name is unthinkable to many officials. But Wu is nothing if not adaptable. You can practically hear her calculating every move, weighing each whisper, measuring the loyalty of every minister. This is the era when she first begins issuing official edicts in her own name. That's right. She's no longer hiding behind her husband's authority. Instead, she sends out orders signed by herself, a move that shocks the court like a thunderclap in the dead of night. At the same time, Wu sponsors massive construction projects, including new temples and Buddhist statues. She knows the power of religion, its ability to unite, inspire, and legitimize rule. The palace fills with the smell of sandalwood and jasmine incense, while monks chant praises that sound suspiciously like political manifestos. One favorite of hers is the Diamond Sutra, a Buddhist text emphasizing impermanence and wisdom. She commissions several lavish copies, and their calligraphy workshops become hotbeds of palace gossip. The monks insist that Wu is destined by the heavens to bring harmony to the realm. Convenient, right? But of course, not everyone buys it. Historians still argue whether Wu was a devout believer or simply a master of political symbolism, leveraging religion as a tool of power. You decide it's probably a bit of both, because ambition and faith often make strange bedfellows. Speaking of strange, there's a delightful yet slightly odd detail from this time. Wu reportedly used a mixture of crushed pearls and fragrant oils as part of her beauty regimen. Apparently, this concoction was supposed to keep her skin glowing. A practice as expensive as it was eccentric. You imagine her face gleaming in candlelight, surrounded by jars of exotic creams and scrolls of poetry. As you wander through the emperor's private chambers, you overhear ministers whispering nervously. The court is split between admiration and fear. Some admire her sharp intellect and ability to maintain stability. Others fear her ruthless ambition and growing authority. In one particularly tense meeting, Wu proposes a reform to the civil service exams, allowing more talented commoners to rise through the ranks. This shakes up the aristocracy, who've enjoyed exclusive access for generations. You can almost hear the grinding of old gears, the reluctant acceptance of new ones. Meanwhile, the emperor is growing weaker, and the question of succession looms. Wu has sons, several of them, and each comes with his own faction and ambitions. You watch the subtle rivalries unfold, a quiet storm brewing beneath the palace's polished surface. Then in 683 CE, Gaozong dies. The palace is plunged into uncertainty. Wu's position is precarious. Technically, the emperor is dead, and the throne should pass to one of her sons. But history shows you this transition rarely goes smoothly. Power vacuums attract vultures, and Wu is no stranger to fighting for survival. Here's where things get really interesting. Rather than retreating, Wu seizes the moment. She quickly consolidates power by placing her youngest son, Li Ji, on the throne as Emperor Zhongzong, but with one huge caveat. She retains the title of Empress Dowager, effectively ruling as regent. For you, this is like watching the ultimate chess game. Wu isn't satisfied with being the puppet master. She's preparing to take center stage. But the court? Oh, the court is restless. The aristocrats bristle at a woman wielding the real power. Some conspire, others openly oppose her. Wu responds with a mixture of charm, threats, and strategic marriages. She's a master of the long game. Quirky bit, rumor has it she employed secret police to root out dissenters. They were called the Iron Hats, and their tactics ranged from intimidation to disappearances. You get the sense that palace intrigue at this point is less Game of Thrones and more a very stressful episode of Survivor. Historians still debate how much power Wu wielded as Empress Dowager versus how much she ruled in her own right. Was she a behind-the-scenes influence, or the de facto sovereign? The answer, you sense, lies somewhere in between. Meanwhile, Wu continues to rewrite history, literally. She commissions new histories that highlight her achievements and downplay any opposition. Some of these revisions paint her predecessors in a less than flattering light. You spot a few fiery passages condemning her critics as morally weak or politically incompetent. By now, Wu Zhao is no longer the shy concubine or the sidelined empress. She is the architect of a new era, a woman reshaping the very idea of power in imperial China. You settle back, letting the soft rustle of silk and the distant gong of temple bells wash over you. There's more to come. Much more. The empire holds its breath as you watch Wu Zetian step out from the shadows and claim the spotlight with a force that feels both inevitable and electric. The year is 690 CE, and this is the moment no one quite expected. Wu Zhao declares herself emperor, not empress, mind you, but emperor, and establishes the Zhou dynasty, interrupting the Tang. You blink. Yes, you heard that right. She officially declares herself the ruler of China, founding a new dynasty with her own name. This is unprecedented. The first and only female emperor in Chinese history. The court reacts like a shaken snow globe. Some tremble, others cheer, many plot. You, meanwhile, are wide-eyed, nestled under your blankets, imagining the palace chatter. Did she just say emperor? Isn't that masculine? It was, and yes, it was. Wu wasn't interested in subtlety now. She claimed the dragon's seat with no apologies, no disclaimers. She wore the title like armor, the robes like a proclamation. This empire is mine. But how did she pull this off? Well, remember those years of careful groundwork? The purges, the children, the religious endorsements? They all culminated in this bold assertion. Wu Zetian's court was a whirlwind of reform and ruthless efficiency. She promoted officials based on talent rather than birth, which rattled the old aristocracy. Imagine your favorite exclusive club suddenly admitting new members with no pedigree but killer skills. The civil service exams were revamped, expanding access and shifting power to meritocracy. This caused both admiration and resentment. Some ministers saw her as a breath of fresh air. Others saw her as a usurper who shattered sacred traditions. Scholars still debate whether her reforms permanently improved governance or merely served to consolidate her power. She also revamped the bureaucracy, establishing a secret police network to root out dissenters and potential traitors. You recall the Iron Hats from before. Now their role grew even more sinister. Fear spread through the court like wildfire. Everyone wondered who might vanish next. One quirky detail. Wu reportedly had a custom-built palace prison hidden beneath the royal gardens. It was said to be so well concealed that even the emperor's guards sometimes forgot it existed. Talk about keeping your enemies close and locked away. Meanwhile, Wu continued to play the religious game masterfully. She endorsed the worship of Maitreya, the future Buddha, depicted as a female ruler bringing peace and prosperity. Temples across the empire displayed statues with features resembling her own, and monks composed hymns praising her divine right to rule. This wasn't mere flattery. It was propaganda wrapped in incense smoke, a divine seal stamped on her unprecedented reign. Of course, not everyone was convinced. There were whispered rumors at court. Some said she practiced black magic. Others accused her of ruthlessly eliminating rivals with poison or worse. You can almost hear the scandalized gasps from behind folding screens. In a particularly audacious move, Wu arranged marriages for her children that solidified her grip on power, marrying her daughters into influential families while carefully controlling her son's ambitions. She knew better than anyone that in the imperial family, family loyalty often meant little. Remember that daughter who died mysteriously? Well, now the surviving children were players on her grand chessboard. Some prospered under her watchful eye, while others fell from favor, or simply disappeared. Wu's reign also saw unprecedented attention to culture and the arts. She patronized poets, painters, and scholars, transforming the capital Chang'an into a vibrant cultural hub. You imagine lantern festivals with fireworks blooming against the night sky, the streets alive with music and laughter. A stark contrast to the political tension simmering just beneath. Yet, Wu's image remained complicated. To some, she was a visionary leader, a protector of the people, and a reformer who broke centuries of patriarchal norms. To others, she was a tyrant who wielded power with an iron fist, unafraid to crush anyone in her way. Historians still argue whether her legacy is one of progress or oppression, or, more likely, a complicated mixture of both. As you settle into the story's rhythm, you realize Wu Zetian's life is a tapestry woven with ambition, intellect, religion, love, and fear. A story that refuses to fit neatly into good or evil boxes. And just when you think she might rest on her laurels, you realize there's more ahead. The empire is hers, but how long can she hold it? And what shadows lurk within her court? For now, the moon hangs low over the palace rooftops, the night quiet except for the soft rustling of silk and the distant chant of monks, a lullaby for a restless empire. The palace settles into an uneasy rhythm as Wu Zetian, now the reigning emperor, continues to weave her intricate web of power. But here's the thing. Ruling an empire is a marathon, not a sprint. You might think that once she claimed the throne, she'd kick back. But no. Empress Wu is in it for the long haul, and the challenges she faces are as vast as the empire itself. At the heart of her reign is the constant balancing act between reform and tradition. She pushes forward sweeping changes, expanding the imperial examination system, promoting talented scholars, and implementing new tax laws designed to ease burdens on peasants. It's a bold vision, one that makes the bureaucracy buzz with activity. Yet Wu also knows the dangers of upsetting too many powerful aristocrats at once. So she tempers her reforms with respect for some customs, blending innovation with tradition like a skilled chef mixing ingredients to perfection. You might picture her holding court beneath a vast painted ceiling, surrounded by advisors and officials nervously awaiting her verdict. And she doesn't disappoint. Wu's decisions are sharp, her wit quicker than a sparrow's flight. Her laughter rare but bright. But even the brightest light casts shadows. Wu's reign is peppered with intrigue. Rival factions jockey for influence, and the secret police keep a tight grip on potential dissenters. Courtiers vanish overnight. Rumors swirl like mist. You catch whispers that even her closest allies can never be entirely trusted. Fringe stories suggest Wu employed supernatural tactics to maintain control, including fortune-tellers and astrologers who advised her daily decisions. She surrounded herself with a team of mystics who claimed to interpret the will of the heavens, ensuring her rule was not only earthly but divine. Historians still debate how much Wu personally believed in these mystical arts versus using them as tools to bolster her authority. On the cultural front, Wu's patronage of the arts flourishes. The capital city Chang'an becomes a dazzling center of poetry, painting, and music. Lantern festivals light up the night, casting shadows that dance alongside tales of her rule. Interestingly, Wu personally enjoyed writing poetry, though only a handful of her works survive today. Some describe her verses as surprisingly tender, a side that contrasts with her ruthless reputation. You imagine her, perhaps late at night, scribbling quietly by candlelight, the steady scratch of brush on silk, a soothing counterpoint to palace intrigue. Meanwhile, the imperial family continues to be a source of both strength and complication. Wu's sons, raised under her vigilant eye, struggle to carve out their own places. There's an ongoing tension between filial duty and ambition, a drama playing out behind closed doors. You might recall earlier stories of suspicious deaths among her children. Some scholars speculate these tragedies were accidents. Others suspect darker machinations. Either way, family loyalty in the Wu household is a delicate thread, stretched taut with political necessity. In one particularly curious episode, Wu allegedly appointed her daughter as a royal consort to the newly enthroned emperor, her own grandson, blurring the lines of family and politics in a way that leaves you scratching your head. Through it all, Wu maintains a public image of benevolence and strength. She commissions impressive public works, canals, granaries, and temples, to improve lives and demonstrate her commitment to the empire's prosperity. These projects boost her popularity among commoners, even as elites grumble. One small but quirky note. Wu supposedly kept a beloved pet crane, a symbol of longevity and immortality. This bird was said to roam freely in the palace gardens, occasionally interrupting court proceedings with its loud calls. You can't help but smile picturing the imperial crane causing mild chaos. But as the years pass, Wu's health begins to wane. The once vibrant, formidable leader grows more introspective. You notice how she increasingly surrounds herself with trusted confidants, and yet remains vigilant against any hint of betrayal. Historians continue to debate her final years. Was she a weary monarch preparing to step down gracefully, or a determined ruler clinging to power with fierce resolve? The answer remains as elusive as the last rays of twilight. For now, you watch the sun dip below the horizon, casting golden light over the palace rooftops. The empire breathes, restless but enduring, under the steady gaze of China's first and only female emperor. You awaken again in the cool hush of the palace, where time feels slowed, like ink slowly blooming on parchment. Wu Zetian is older now, her once black hair streaked with silver, her gaze still as sharp as a sword freshly drawn from its sheath. The empire she rules has grown used to her, but acceptance is not the same as affection. At court, ministers bow lower, speak softer, and watch her more closely. They know her strength lies not just in command, but in the patience of a spider. And now, even as she begins to show signs of age, no one dares whisper succession too loudly. You feel it in the air, thick with incense and caution. Still, Wu isn't idle. She's launched one last push to immortalize her legacy. That's right. Her eyes are fixed on immortality, not just through legend, but in stone. She commissions the Longmen grottos to be expanded, carving Buddhist statues deep into limestone cliffs. One particular statue, the colossal Vairocana Buddha, has facial features that bear a suspicious resemblance to Wu herself. Coincidence? Unlikely. You stroll among the chisel marks, the scent of stone dust mixing with lotus blossoms. The statue's serene face looks down with eternal calm, a stone echo of the woman who dared to rule. Historians still argue whether this resemblance was intentional self-deification or just an artist's tribute to the emperor's patronage. Either way, it's unforgettable. Behind palace walls, Wu becomes increasingly reliant on a pair of young men, the Zhang brothers. Charming, ambitious, and decades her junior, these brothers become her close advisors, and yes, also possibly her lovers. Their sudden rise alarms the court. Rumors fly faster than arrows. One fringe rumor claims they mixed secret elixirs to extend her life. Another suggests they manipulated her to further their own ambitions. As always, truth and myth entwine like dragon and phoenix. Regardless, their influence grows. Ministers fume. You watch their resentment simmer during court meetings where the brothers speak boldly, their silk robes far too rich, their smiles a touch too smug. Eventually, a coalition of senior officials has enough. They begin plotting, not against Wu directly, few dare, but against her inner circle. Their goal? Remove the Zhang brothers and pressure Wu to retire. But Wu isn't quite ready to give up her throne. Even now, in her 70s, she clings to authority with the quiet desperation of someone who knows history rarely forgives powerful women. Retirement isn't a nap in a sunny garden. It's a fall from power, and possibly life. Despite this, illness creeps in. Her court appearances grow rarer. She speaks from behind silken screens, her voice raspier, her tone more brittle. You sense it, like a candle flickering before the wax runs dry. And then, the coup. In 705 CE, officials storm the palace in a swift, bloodless maneuver. The Zhang brothers are executed. Wu, weakened and outmaneuvered, is forced to abdicate. Her son, Zhongzong, yes, the one she'd sidelined years ago, is restored to the throne. Just like that, the Zhou dynasty ends. The Tang dynasty is back. You'd expect chaos, but oddly, things settle quickly. Wu is granted the title of Empress Regnant and allowed to live out her final days in quiet dignity within the palace. No exile, no prison, just a fading presence in a place that once bent entirely to her will. A curious epilogue unfolds. Wu, despite everything, is buried alongside Emperor Gaozong in the Qianling Mausoleum. Their tomb bears one especially haunting feature: a blank stele. This massive stone tablet stands without inscription. No praises, no triumphs, no names, just silence. Historians still debate its meaning. Was it humility, a political erasure, or a defiant choice, leaving history to judge her legacy for itself? You imagine Wu watching the stone being set in place, saying nothing, just folding her hands, eyes knowing. After all, what words could contain a life like hers? And here's a quirky last note. A local legend says the blank stele writes itself over time. Scholars who visit claim to hear whispers near the tomb, echoes of Wu's reign carried on the mountain wind. Maybe it's superstition. Or maybe, just maybe, she really did find a way to speak through silence. As you walk away from the tomb, the mountain air cool against your skin, you carry the image of that silent stone, looming tall and proud. Not quite erased, not quite explained. So now, the official story of Wu Zetian's reign has ended. But in the dimming light of her afterlife, you find yourself wandering through her legacy. Not the bloodline or the politics, but the echoes she left behind. Like a stone dropped in a still pond, the ripples of her rule spread far beyond her lifetime. You drift through the streets of Chang'an decades later and notice something odd. Despite being quietly removed from official records for a time, her name scrubbed, her deeds softened, people still whisper about her. Poems are passed around in secret, plays performed with veiled references. Even after death, Wu lives on in rumor and in art. And that blank stele? It's still standing, still stubbornly silent. You imagine historians standing before it, scratching their heads, wondering whether the absence of words is more powerful than any epitaph ever written. Her influence on the bureaucracy persists too. The merit-based exam system she strengthened, still ticking along, slowly becoming a staple of imperial governance for centuries. A dry topic, sure, but think of it as the original job interview process, minus the awkward handshakes. You ace the test, you get the job. Simple, revolutionary, and you can't overlook her impact on gender roles. Wu shattered every glass ceiling in sight, then used the shards to decorate her throne. Before her, women were advisors, consorts, or regents, never emperors. After her? Still no emperors, but no one could ever say it was impossible again. Historians still argue whether she advanced the status of women or merely used her exceptional skill to bend the rules just for herself. It's a debate that flickers through modern scholarship like candlelight through a paper screen. And then there's the cultural influence. Wu's reign was a golden age for Buddhism in China. Temples flourished. Art bloomed. Pilgrims traveled roads she paved, seeking wisdom in places she protected. Even today, statues and calligraphy from her reign still survive, their elegance whispering stories in ink and stone. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some scholars believe she created a few Chinese characters herself, new words to express her authority and ideology. One of them, Zhao, a character she supposedly used in her own name, means to shine like the sun and moon. Custom-made branding. 8th century style. You can't help but respect that. Who invents their own name and gets it printed in imperial records? But of course, not all of Wu's legacy is golden. Some of her harsher methods, torture, surveillance, purges, set a chilling precedent. Future emperors took notes. The secret police remained a feature of the court for years. A shadowy tool first sharpened under her reign. Her political manipulations also became a blueprint. Later rulers studied her strategies like a playbook. How to win favor, silence dissent, use religion, play factions. She turned survival into statecraft, and statecraft into a form of art. Even now, her story lingers. In modern China, she's the subject of TV dramas, historical novels, fan fiction, memes. Some portray her as a feminist icon, others as a cautionary tale. There's even a wax statue of her in Madame Tussauds. You imagine her face frozen in regal contemplation, maybe with one eyebrow ever so slightly raised, like she's still judging your outfit. And yet, even with all this attention, she remains an enigma. The contradictions refuse to resolve. Was she cruel or brilliant? A liberator or a despot? A product of her time or a prophet of what could be? Maybe she was all of these things. Or maybe she defies categorization entirely. You lean back, the story of Wu still swirling in your mind, like incense smoke refusing to fade. And it's worth noting, after Wu's death, no other woman ever took the title of emperor. Plenty of powerful empresses followed, but none crossed that final threshold again. As if the empire, exhausted by her rule, quietly shut that door behind her. Still, the door was opened once. And somewhere in the mind of a poet or a schoolgirl learning calligraphy, Wu Zetian still reigns, whispered, wondered, remembered. Now that you've traced her path from obscure concubine to the throne itself, you slip into the gentle current of the years after Wu Zetian's death, floating through the quieter ripples of her aftermath. The empire carries on, as it always does, its great wheels turning slowly, heavily, like an old mill grinding rice into memory. You find yourself in the court of Emperor Zhongzong, her son, once banished, now restored. He's surrounded by old ministers and new favorites, none quite possessing the presence of the woman who'd ruled before him. The throne, once molded to her strength, now sits a little too big for anyone else. Zhongzong tries to assert control, but court life is a tangled mess. His wife, Empress Wei, begins echoing Wu's own strategies, positioning herself as a power behind the scenes. You almost smirk at the symmetry of it all. The empire may forget, but palace intrigue never does. There's even a brief flicker where Empress Wei seems poised to become the next Wu Zetian, a woman stepping into real authority. But it doesn't last. Factions rise, conspiracies bloom, and she's overthrown in a swift, bloody twist. You sigh. The more things change. Still, Wu's influence lingers in subtler ways. Her reign normalized the presence of powerful women at court, not as shadows behind a throne, but as political players in their own right. You hear their names whispered down palace corridors. Shangguan Wanner, Princess Taiping, strong-willed, ambitious, daring to speak when others expected them to bow. And now, let's talk about Shangguan Wanner for a moment. Wu's loyal secretary, poet, and confidant. She survived purges, wrote imperial edicts, and helped manage the empire during Wu's later years. Some call her the female prime minister. It's whispered she once challenged a royal decision by correcting the emperor's poetry. Now that's bold. A fringe tale says Shangguan wrote a secret biography of Wu, buried beneath the palace floorboards. It's never been found, but the idea alone makes you tilt your head and wonder. Historians still argue whether this mysterious manuscript ever existed, or if it's just legend layered atop legend. You walk through these post-Wu years feeling a kind of aftershock. Everyone's reacting to her in some way, rejecting her example or mimicking it, or pretending it never happened at all. Even the chroniclers struggle. Some paint her as a ruthless usurper, others as a necessary force of reform. Few manage to do both. The Tang dynasty stabilizes, then flourishes again under Emperor Xuanzong, Zhongzong's nephew. But you sense Wu's influence even in this new golden age. The institutions she fortified, the bureaucratic culture she strengthened, they're all part of the empire's muscle memory now. And here's something quirky. Centuries later, in the Song dynasty, scholars debated Wu's legacy using elaborate allegories. One even compared her to a phoenix who lit her own fire, burned brightly, then left behind a single shining feather. Bit dramatic, but you get the point. Modern historians remain divided. Was she a feminist trailblazer before feminism had a name? A brutal opportunist exploiting chaos? Or just a supremely competent ruler who happened to be a woman in a time when that alone made her suspect? There's no neat answer. Wu Zetian forces us to sit with discomfort. You want to box her up? Hero, villain, icon, monster? But she just doesn't fit. And maybe that's why she stays with us. Because like most of history's giants, she's more mirror than statue. You see in her what you're ready to find. Outside, the tomb remains quiet. The blank stele still waits. You imagine placing your palm against the cool stone, listening for words that never come. But deep down, you know the silence is its own story. Her legacy isn't written in praise or condemnation. It's written in questions. You wander back through Chang'an, now quieter, dustier. Children run past you playing at being emperors and poets. A street vendor calls out selling plum wine. Someone's dog barks at a passing paper kite. And high above, in the quiet reach of sky, the moon hangs round and bright, as if watching all this unfold with a knowing smile. Because for all the noise of her reign, Wu Zetian left behind a stillness that echoes. Not just in marble halls or history books, but in the small shift she caused in the world's idea of who could rule. You settle into that idea now. Let it wrap around you like a silk robe in late autumn. Wu was here. She changed everything. And somehow the world kept spinning. And so here you are, at the very edge of the tale, where echoes fade and the lanterns burn low. The life of Wu Zetian has unraveled across your memory like a long silk scroll, and now the brush lifts from the parchment. You rest beneath the shade of a fig tree on the outskirts of the capital, where the wind moves slow and soft through the leaves. Time feels unhurried here. A few travelers pass the road, discussing taxes or harvests or, yes, even the emperor's mother. They speak her name with awe or suspicion or mischief. Sometimes all three. Her legacy, even in its twilight, refuses to vanish. Wu was more than the first and only female emperor of China. She was a woman who learned to play the game better than anyone else, in a time when even sitting at the board was forbidden. You remember how she started, one of many faceless girls in red robes, brought to serve the emperor. You remember how she vanished into a convent, then clawed her way back into the palace. And not just into the palace, into power. At each step, she transformed herself, concubine to consort, consort to regent, regent to emperor. She changed titles like masks, adapting, adjusting, until even the court forgot she had ever been anything else. And yet, she never truly belonged. Even with the throne under her and the empire at her feet, she remained an anomaly. Her rise was spectacular, yes, but also precarious. Like building a palace on a cliffside, she managed it with daring and genius, but the cracks were always there. Historians still argue whether her methods were necessary evils or symptoms of deeper tyranny, whether the reforms she made were truly for the people or merely to tighten her grip, whether she ruled with wisdom or simply with fear wrapped in brocade. What's undeniable is her effectiveness. Few rulers expanded and stabilized China as she did. Few left behind systems that would shape governance for centuries. And none, not one, did it while being considered an unnatural ruler by the very culture they served. Here's a curious little detail. For centuries after her death, official history books refused to acknowledge her as a proper emperor. They listed her as an interloper, an aberration, as if pretending hard enough could erase the fact that she had reigned, that she had succeeded. But time, as always, has its own sense of humor. Today, statues of Wu Zetian stand tall in museums. Her name appears in textbooks, not just as a footnote, but as a chapter. Scholars study her with seriousness. Artists paint her with reverence. Tourists walk the grounds of her former palaces, reading plaques with her name etched in bold. You watch this from your perch beneath the fig tree, as if from a safe distance. You wonder if she would have smiled at all this, or scowled that it took so long. You wander one last time past the Longmen grottos, where that giant Buddha still sits carved into stone. The face, gentle and placid, watches the world with eyes half closed. Some still claim it looks like her. Others say it looks like the divine. Maybe there's no difference. You look up at the sky. The stars are coming out now, blinking slowly into the velvet dark. One by one, like palace lanterns being lit for a midnight ritual. Each star a name, each name a story. And somewhere among them, a lone gleaming ember that burns just a little brighter, refusing to fade. Wu Zetian, No stately inscription, no epitaph, just this long, strange, unbelievable story. And now, it's yours. The wind is slower now. Even the breeze seems to whisper more softly, as if it too has grown weary from so many lifetimes. You lie back beneath the fig tree once more, its broad leaves rustling gently above you. The scent of jasmine drifts in from a nearby courtyard, mingling with the earthy perfume of soil and old stone. Far away, a bell chimes, faint, distant, like a dream you're already forgetting. Your breathing slows. The long journey through Wu Zetian's world settles around you like a weighted blanket. Warm, a little heavy, deeply reassuring. You've witnessed an empire shift beneath one woman's will. You've watched as time, stubborn and relentless, folded her back into its rhythm. You've seen her rise, her reign, her silence. And now, there's only stillness. Gentle. Final. Let your thoughts drift like the river outside Chang'an. Let the images blur and soften. Palace courtyards fading into mist, dragon thrones dissolving into clouds, names folding into the hush of forgotten scrolls. It's just you now, and the stars, and the soft promise of sleep. Whatever came before, ambition, rebellion, glory, it's all behind you. Ahead lies nothing but peace. Let your eyelids fall. Let your breathing deepen. Wu Zetian is resting now, and so are you.